Okay, so now we're going to turn it over to Rick, who has synthesized all these ideas and the entire last day and a half, and will offer some closing comments.
Great, thanks very much. This feedback, I think we've just scratched the surface. Like I said, don't feel that you're done providing us feedback. Dust off your hands, get on the plane. You know, we had this neat session. I said 5 things. Write us, okay? Send us an email. Think about it on the plane. If this were your job to create a movement in America that would change the public perception of higher ed, what would you be doing? How does change happen? Send us your thoughts. We need to hear from you, okay? You also hear from us from a survey. We're going to try to understand how we can improve the mechanics of it, but also the planning going forward. So we don't have much time, and I'm not going to bore you with a long thing, but I do want to provide a couple of reflections that were provoked really by the conversations last night and today. We opened this conference with the sort of personal observation I had when I was president at Olin. What did you do to my kid? That rattled in my ears for years and eventually led me to resign from Olin because I thought there was a bigger calling. I grew up in an environment where there were no academic colleagues or no one in my family to look to. No one had, certainly, first time I met an engineer or a person with a PhD was when I showed up as a freshman in college. Education changed my life. Now I think my wife would tell you I'm a zealot. I don't make sense. I try to do unrealistic things. I only have 2 speeds, which is wide open and off. It's, you know, thank heavens you don't have to live with me. So that's who I've become. Is that a good thing? Let me tell you what happened. I'm old enough now that I had a 55-year high school reunion by Zoom because I live 3,000 miles away from where I grew up. The high school I went to was 50% Hispanic farm workers who had no interest in college. We had 120 in our graduating class. 12 of us went to college. 4 of us went to a 4-year college. The kids who cared about having a high school reunion were mostly the ones who went to college. So we Zoomed, we had a conversation. I hadn't talked to them in decades, okay? We all grew up in the same town. It's called Tranquility. It has 650 people if you count the chickens and the dogs. I grew up on a farm, 4th generation, at the same place. It was a dairy farm when my dad grew up. We had 10,000 chickens in the backyard when I was 5. It was a cotton farm when I was going up. My brother and I are the only 2 in our generation who got out. We got out because of the University of California, which had, if you graduate in the top 1/8 of your high school class, you're guaranteed a spot somewhere in the UC system. And I wound up going to UC Davis, which kind of looked like where I grew up, okay? It was a fabulous place for me. And then moved on to MIT and Caltech, and then I've had a title of professor for 49 years. I don't have anything in common with my classmates. And as I started talking with them, I mean, I believe in my whole being that education is not just about getting a good job. A good education changes what you know, but a great education changes who you are, and to me, that's a good thing. It's not necessarily a good thing for everyone. You need to think about that. I sure thought about that. There's an arrogance to our message. I want you to know this, okay? Really? This feels a little bit to them, to the people I grew up with, and to my family that I can't talk with for more than 10 minutes now because we don't have anything in common. It's a little bit like the Roman Empire, what we're trying to do. You know, we're going to invade Latin America and we're going to convert you to being a Catholic and do away with your pagan ways and we'll save your soul. It's an absurd analogy, I understand that, but there is an arrogance to it. There is a judgment to it. What? My life needs to be transformed? Why? I mean, it's worked great for generations in our family. In fact, when I was in high school, I remember people in the church I grew up with pleading with my dad not to send me to the University of California, because he said they had seen this before. When that happens, these kids go away, they put weird ideas in their heads, they don't have any of the same values that we have anymore, and generally they never come back. And you know, I haven't been back to tranquility since my dad died for the funeral. There is a flip side to life transformative education, and the thing I've noticed in the voices of the people who are most unhappy with higher education today has to do with the language and the way we come across. There's 3 things to keep in your head. Put yourself in the shoes of the person that you think would benefit from having a life transformative education. Are you coming across as judgmental in their view? Are you coming across as condescending because you're now at a higher place and you know things that they don't know? And are you coming across as self-righteous, that this is going to make you a better person? If that's the way they're reading you, don't count on them standing up and saluting and joining the movement, okay? We need to look at our messaging. And I think actually that Lynn Pasquarella nailed it today. I don't know how many of you were here for the talk. She said the heart of this is compassion. This has to come from a place of compassion. And we actually thought about that a lot in the early days of Olin. The idea was if you have an interaction with 3 people, well, let's take the candidates weekend for Olin, which is this weekend interview engagement with candidates for admission to Olin, and they put them in teams and we do crazy things. At the end of that, what did you learn? The most meaningful thing to me about how you learned is to ask people to write down 3 adjectives that describes the person you got to know. 3 adjectives. If compassion isn't one of those adjectives for the people that we're trying to work with, I think we can forget it. I don't think we're going to change attitudes on scale, and there are people going to join us. And right now, that isn't the adjective that most of the people that I'm talking with in the public have. So we have some work to do about messaging. I think it's really important. Another thing that came up, which I thought was interesting, yesterday Bill Burnett was talking about conversations at Stanford that had to do with Muslims and the different cultural backgrounds that they have. There was a discussion about whether our role is to help them find their calling, find their mission, find what major they should be in, right? So you want to structure a curriculum to do that. And the Muslim kids are saying, what? My parents are going to decide what I do. They're going to decide who I marry, okay? This is like who we are. Did you not know that? And there isn't a safe place for them to talk, to even have that conversation so we can get to know that, because we're so US-centric in the way we think about it. Which reminds me of a keynote that we had in our first conference, September of 21. I don't know how many of you were involved in the coalition then, but it's online. You could hear it now. This is by Jonathan Lee Walton at Wake Forest. Jonathan Lee Walton is an African-American Dean of Divinity at Wake Forest, and he was making the case for why universities should have a divinity school. And it was not so that we can convert everybody like the Roman Empire. It was so there could be a safe place for people to come and tell you who I am and how I grew up and how I believe without feeling judgment, okay? And that's how he came to this. And he grew up in Atlanta, and it turns out that the church played a really key role in his life, and he wound up being a pastor for a while, and he left that because he was discouraged with the culture in the church. And then he went to Harvard, and he was an academic in theology, figuring, well, this is about truth and justice, and and he left that too, okay? It's more complicated than that. When you start talking about life transformative education, be careful, okay? It will change who people are. It'll change their relationship with their family. It'll change their identity. Yes, if we do this right, they'll be more secure from a financial point of view, which everybody seems on board with. Now, last 5 minutes, the future for the coalition. How do we grow a movement that makes this thing work? You know, remember the movie The Wizard of Oz? The coalition is kind of like that. There's a curtain and there's a very few levers and a few of us that are pulling things, and that's how it looks like it's like happening. The analogy we used at Olin was building the airplane while we're flying it. And we have a lot of building to do because we are not really capable of managing a lot of the opportunities. One of the opportunities we keep getting is international universities. I got a letter last night from a fellow at the University of Bath in the UK who's very interested in joining. There's another group from China. There's a group from Latin America. We just don't have the capacity at this point. We have one half-time employee, okay, and the rest of us, and that's Nancy, and Nancy Sullivan, who's an executive assistant who works at home. The name tags were done by Nancy and her son and her husband, working until midnight on Friday night, just putting them in a box so I could carry them in my briefcase. That's who we are. So we have a lot of things to do. So in the next few months, we have to, for example, hire an executive director. We really need somebody who knows what they're doing and who wakes up every morning and says, this is my job, and I'm going to make sure the next conference happens and it doesn't get delayed by 6 months because of something else. We need a great launch to this Learning Well journal, Learning Well magazine. I am so excited by what that can do. This can be the source, like the keynotes that you've heard today and yesterday. These could be articles in a journal that could be seen nationally and distributed very easily around the world. Thought pieces, not 50 words of that's it. But we need to develop an editorial board, and Margie and I are worried about that. We have to do this quickly. If you have the right ideas of who the people are that should be on such an editorial board, send us your thoughts. Not just, oh, I think you should have Bill Gates on this. If you happen to know Bill Gates and you can introduce us, let's talk. We also have to grow to 50 institutions. This is our mission with our funding sources. Honestly, I don't think it would be hard to grow to 50, depending on what we mean by being a member and who the institutions are. I'm discovering, easier to grow to 50 using small liberal arts colleges that already do 90% of what we're doing. And the whole conversation about life transformative education is kind of built into their DNA. Olin, for example. It's not the same thing to do that at Arizona State University or to do that at Georgia Tech, who's one of the schools that we've been talking with, the University of Virginia, University of Michigan. It's hard, but that's where most of the kids are in the country. How do we do that? Okay? How do we grow at scale so that it moves the needle in the country? That's a big issue. We've talked a little bit about a public advisory council so that we don't get into an echo chamber where we're shocked to find out that the employers don't think that kids are ready for work, even after we've done all this work to, with the great PowerPoint slides, it shows that we've prepared them for the workplace. But you talk to the kids in the workplace and it's not what they were needing and it's not what the companies need. We need to hear from people in order to get the right information out. So we're working on that. Hopefully in the next 6 months or a year, we'll have that launched. We need a business model. There is, this thing in the real world called budgets, and we have to be good stewards of the resources we've gotten. Last spring, when we came forward with the expanded mission to contribute to restoring the social contract in America with higher ed, in 6 weeks we raised $3 million. We did not have anyone trim our proposal. We got exactly what we asked for from the foundations we did. But that's got a time limit, and there's some expectations for outcomes. What does it mean to be a member? Right now there are no dues, very small registration fees for this. Our friends at Arizona State kind of kicked us in the shins and said, really, that's all you're going to charge? We said, yep, we have to tiptoe in the water before we dive into the deep end. We have to develop a business model that's sustaining so that this isn't always dependent entirely on philanthropy, that it in fact can become like the AAC&U, which has been around for 100 years and can plan for multi-year programs without disruption. So that's a little bit of the window of what's on our radar. This has been so energizing for me. What did you do to my kid? Be careful what you listen to. This group, I believe, can change the world. You know that old quote from Margaret Mead, right? Never doubt that a small group of dedicated people can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. Thank you for coming. I hope you all have a safe trip home.
Thank you very much, Rick. Before we all break up, and actually you're all welcome to stay, just a couple of last logistical things. There is lunch just outside where we've been having the buffet. There are box lunches. This room is available to us for the foreseeable future, for at least part of the rest of the afternoon. So you're encouraged to stay here and continue conversations that you've started. If you need to start getting ready to travel, of course, you can take your lunch with you. One other thing I wanted to mention, there is one last part of the program that a few people have signed up for. We have a tour of Dreamscape Learn, which is a facility here at Arizona State. It's in the Creativity Center. I actually have maps if you need to find it, not too far away. There is space for 24 people to participate in that. It's at 3 o'clock. 14 people have signed up so far, so there is space for 10 more. If you're interested, you may see Becky, and we can make sure that you can participate in that experience. Should be a lot of fun, actually, to see what they're doing. Lastly, I want to just take a few minutes to thank the many people who have made this possible. As Rick was saying, there's a lot of volunteers that are part of the organization that drive. I think we're working on structuring that, as Rick was mentioning, to create more of an infrastructure to the many things that we want to achieve. But I want to thank all the people who have contributed, and in particular, I want to thank Provost Gonzalez for being willing, for saying yes to Rick and to us when we asked if we could do this here. I think, as we heard from people, having it on a university or college campus is incredibly valuable, and hear about what's happening at different places. So thank you to you, and to thank in particular to your staff. Delane and Darcy and Becky have been phenomenal. As well as all the tech support and everything else that went into this. I can't imagine how many hours you've put into it. We're incredibly grateful for all that you did. Thank you so much. And thank you all to all of you for being here, for listening to our message, and to thinking about how to make the lives of students better. I mean, that's one clear underlying current to all of us here from lots of different places, lots of different roles and activities at our institutions, but we want to make the lives of students better, and we will do that. Thank you all again for being here.